You're obstructing my right of way, Mr. Roberts. Anything to say about that? Anything to say about that?
Tonight, what happens when those responsible for your protection fail to act?
Mr. Wright, seek some legal advice.
It started with a planning complaint, which spiralled out of control.
The thought that other people could believe what these agencies were saying about me.
The council has been heavily criticised in a report.
By refusing to accept the evidence, the council implied that the complainants were dishonest.
And there are questions about how the police handled the case.
Get out! Get out! Get out! Get out!
You know, how you couldn't come to the conclusion that Mrs. Breckman is the aggressor?
Has it been a good life?
No, it hasn't been a good life. It's been a disaster.
It was a dream, and when we saw this cottage, it didn't look very nice on the internet when I first saw it, but when we actually came here, it was just so pretty, and it was everything that I wanted. The cottage was sweet, the garden was pretty, the land was perfect.
We were delighted, really, yes, to find this place, because it's got an ideal amount, amount of land here.
9 years ago, Tricia Breckman and her partner Eddie Roberts moved to Maesebont in Carmarthenshire.
We wanted to have a cattery, and the cattery would have then led probably to other things, and we could have taken in some rescue animals. That's what we wanted to do.
You were good lifers, really?
A good life, yeah. Yeah, a good life. I suppose, yes, you could call it that.
We had every intention of staying. I would have stayed here, well, until I'd be carried out, probably.
But Tricia and Eddie's dream of the good life was soon shattered.
We became aware of the nuisance as soon as we moved in. We had noise, 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 from digging around in the quarry area, to haulage activities, to maintenance on vehicles, all kinds of noises that shouldn't really have been taking place on a so-called farm. And the numbers of lorries that were there were a clear indication of a haulage yard.
When they were buying the cottage, the couple were only able to visit it in the middle of the day, when all was quiet.
Before buying this, we had already looked into whether or not there were any industrial activities around and about, and told by the council no, there were none. We thought we were moving in next door to a farm, and it clearly wasn't a farm.
The neighbours. Andrew Thomas and his partner Karen, who since died, were running a haulage company without planning permission. Tricia and Eddie rang Carmarthenshire Council and complained to a planning officer.
The response was, well, I don't think anything untoward is going on there. After all, it's a farm. When I tried to explain, well, actually, there are things going on there that aren't conducive to it being a farm, I was told, well, we'll investigate, or we'll monitor, we'll keep an eye on it.
Did you feel he was taking your complaint seriously?
No, not at all. I felt he was fobbing me off, that he didn't want to deal with my complaints.
The council suggested that the couple should gather evidence themselves. They filmed lorries leaving from 6 in the morning and work going on into the early hours. They gave the video to Carmarthenshire Council, hoping it would take action.
Looking back to 2004, it's hard not to conclude that if the council had taken appropriate action when the couple first made their complaints, they might have been spared the long ordeal that followed. But the fact is, the council didn't. And now it's been roundly criticised in this strongly worded report by the Ombudsman, the official office that monitors public services in Wales.
The difficulty with these things is that if you don't tackle them early, they have a tendency not to go away, but to get worse. If enforcement had happened, then the subject matter of much of the dispute wouldn't have existed. And though it can only ever be speculation, the likelihood is that the extremely vitriolic nature of the neighbour dispute wouldn't have been as it was.
The couple couldn't understand why Carmarthenshire had refused to stop the lorries, so they submitted a Freedom of Information request to the council to find out more about the way the authority had handled the case.
They were shocked to discover they weren't the first to be bothered by the lorries. Council records revealed a catalogue of complaints going back 2 years before they moved in. In the files, Mrs. Breckman found several logs of lorry movements kept by a previous owner of the cottage and by a neighbour.
Date 30th of the 4th 02, 6 p.m, 3 haulage lorries. 1st of the 5th 02, 9 p.m, 3 haulage lorries, 1 in lockup, 1 lorry with crane. 3rd of the 5th 02, 6 p.m, haulage lorry loaded with rock. 5th of the 5th 02, 4 p.m, 3 haulage lorries.
Margaret Rees is one of several neighbours who wrote more than once to the council's planning department.
There would be diggers over there, and they were building sheds for the lorries, so there was quite a lot of noise in that respect, but also the noise of the lorries going back and forth, of people shouting. I stopped walking with the dogs because they're so large, the lorries, and it was really quite dangerous.
She told the council there were 5 lorries there, but they denied there were that many.
Nothing happened. That business carried on for quite a number of years. So I would say actually they didn't have any effect at all.
This view is echoed by a now retired government inspector, who 2 years ago heard an appeal in connection with the site, some 9 years after complaints began.
I gather from the evidence that the haulage business had grown over a number of years. It had probably grown through a lack of attention from the local authority, to be honest. I got that impression that they turned a blind eye to 2 lorries, so if someone saw a lorry coming in and out, that could be one of the 2 lorries, I guess. I don't know. They just seemed to turn a blind eye to it.
The lorries kept running and the couple kept complaining. They carried on gathering their evidence, but the council refused to accept it.
Apparently there were numerous site visits carried out over the years, but didn't find any evidence of anything I was complaining about.
The planners told the couple that Mr. Thomas was entitled to bring a lorry home with him because his main haulage site was elsewhere. The farm, they insisted, was agricultural, which is not what the council was saying to the Thomases. They'd applied for permission to build a shed for agricultural storage, but the council refused permission, saying there was insufficient evidence to show it qualified for agricultural use. The shed was eventually built, and then another one, but these were allowed on condition they were used for agriculture. The Ombudsman says that this process was flawed because it didn't give Mrs. Breckman and Mr. Roberts a chance to oppose the sheds through the planning system.
They had to live with the truck movements of persisting over time, with new buildings going up that didn't have planning consent. And all of that had a major impact on them as individuals, their health and their well-being.
What started as an argument over a haulage business was taking a new and disturbing turn.
You've been warned about that camera? You're warned. You're invading my privacy, darling. You created this wall, we're that wall.
The couple's lifeline to the outside world is this lane, which runs on the other side of the gate through the Thomases' land. The couple have a legal right of access, but it was about to become a battleground. In May 2005, the Thomases narrowed the lane with motorway crash barriers and put in extra gates.
My property, Mrs. Breckman. It is my property.
You're harassing me, now go away. And you're intimidating me, now go away. Go away. You. You!
Videoing me this morning.
Will you go away, you stupid man? Oh, go away. Go away.
You do not have my rights.
Go away, please.
It's my gate, it's my property, it's my rights.
Gates hadn't been on that piece of land for 20 odd years. So having narrowed it and put the crush barriers up was very, very intimidating. And to put 2 gates in that were also boarded over, it felt as though they were dictating that we would stay down here, that when we came home we would enter our property on their terms, not our terms.
I wish moving my animals.
Go on. I opened the gate to go out. It had a devastating effect. Psychologically, it was horrific.
The Thomases also started building right next to the couple's cottage. Inside, the couple kept filming. They believed that with their camcorder and a CCTV system which they'd set up, the evidence of harassment would be all too clear. Right on the boundary line, the Thomases also put up a wooden board outside the couple's bedroom window. A cockerel and an old removal van.
Not what you call friendly, is it?
Well, no, it was intended harassment. This blue lorry was put here to harass and annoy.
But there was worse. The lane had become the front line. On 2 occasions, the couple appeared to have been locked in.
No, Andrew, don't give him the key. We'll keep it. Andrew.
It entitles you to open the gates and put in a lock on both of them. You're obstructing my right of way, Mr. Roberts. Anything to say about that? Have you got anything to say about that?
No, I think we'll keep the key. Mr. Roberts.
Mr. Roberts, we'll seek some legal advice. Yeah. Oh. How was that now?
That's a nice bit of violence. Thank you for hitting me in the face.
No violence, Mr.
You've
Roberts.
just hit me in the face. That's an assault.
I did not hit you in the face, Mr. Roberts.
Yes, you did.
A copy of my deeds. Don't tell lies.
You pushed it into my face.
You're a liar. You witnessed that, Royston. He's a liar.
It's not a nice way to live, and when you're living like that for many, many years, no, it's a very unpleasant way to live. Very.
Some people would have just packed up and left.
As Tricia and I said, we cannot give in to bullies.
In desperation, Trish and Eddie went to ask their assembly member for help. He wrote to the council on their behalf.
I certainly believe that the way in which they decided to look at Mrs. Breckman and Mr. Roberts coloured and influenced decisions they took.
If I was as backward as you, I would be worried.
Do you know,
if I was as backward as you and was as low as you two, no wonder you crawled out of England.
The couple also appealed to the police for protection, but in vain.
The police generally weren't very helpful, and I thought, I don't know, I expected them to at least say we'll go and talk to them, something, given that there had been a history here anyway. But they didn't. They were just very non-committal, weren't at all helpful, and certainly didn't appear at all sympathetic. Right, I'm going to call the police. I do want to go out.
When you're going out, you can open the gate.
No, I won't.
Take into consideration, that is not your gate, that's a boundary gate.
I'll go out and I'll open the gates when I want to.
You constantly open the gate.
The couple kept calling the police.
A meeting took place here at council headquarters between planners and an officer from Dyfed-Powys Police to review the couple's concerns. But they concluded that these were civil and not criminal matters, and there was insufficient evidence to bring a case. One comment was the couple might even be guilty of making malicious complaints.
Roderick Glyn Thomas says the way the council handled this case could have influenced the views of others.
If you hear senior officers in the county council telling you, "Ooh, be very careful with these people, they create problems," then that is naturally going to affect the way in which you look at allegations they make, instances which they take part in.
Anybody seeing that evidence would have realised, and looking at it objectively, would have realised that there was a strong case for action. By refusing to accept the evidence, the council implied that the complainants were dishonest, and they made that view known to other agencies involved.
I felt dirtied by it, I felt soiled by it. Mud sticks, as they say, and the thought that other people could believe what these agencies were saying about me was so deeply hurtful, I can't even begin to put it into words.
The confrontations continued, and the couple kept sending their video evidence to the police. But to their astonishment, they found that they were being accused of harassment. Tricia Breckman was arrested 6 times and given 3 police warnings in 2 years. She was charged several times and was even convicted, but when she appealed, the conviction was overturned. All other charges were dropped too. The most distressing incident took place in May 2007. Andrew Thomas can be seen driving a horse down the lane through the gate. Mrs. Breckman just manages to get out of the way. At the time, she needed a hip replacement. She tries to send the horse back up the lane, but he drives it down again. Then, Karen Thomas appears, armed with her own video camera.
Get off of my property. Get off of my property. Get off.
999.
Get off.
999 now, please.
Get off of my property.
99.
Because she was going to walk into me, I put out my left hand to say to her, don't come any closer to me. Just stay at that distance, because I knew that if she barged into me, in all probability, I would have fallen over.
I can hold you back. You're
no,
on
that
my
is
property.
common assault.
No, it isn't.
That is common
Don't
assault.
come into my space. Don't
I
come
need
into
the
my
police
space.
now. Now.
Don't come into my space. Get out.
You.
Get out.
You have just
Don't
assaulted
come
me.
into my space.
Take that camera.
Get out.
Take that camera.
Get out. Your
Police,
horse is up
please,
there.
I've
Get
just
out.
been assaulted.
No, you haven't.
Blind Pan Farm, my suburbs.
You're in my space now. Get out.
Please, police.
Get out. Get out. Get out. Get out.
The police arrived, but after a tense discussion in the cottage, the result was not the one Mrs. Breckman anticipated.
He just put these handcuffs on me and I said, oh God, what are you doing? He said, I'm taking you now, you're under arrest for assault.
Tricia Breckman was brought here to Carmarthen Police Station to be questioned, where she was read a statement that had been made by Karen Thomas.
They say that as a result of you opening the lower gates and causing the animal to startle by making a noise, that the animal got free and entered your property. Is that correct?
No comment.
We showed the footage to Mrs. Breckman's AM. He was astonished that she was the one who'd been arrested.
You know, how you can come to the conclusion that Mrs. Breckman is the aggressor in that sort of situation? So he's clearly sending the horse down, isn't he? And this is the difficulty, trying to decide how people came to these decisions based on the evidence which was available.
Tricia Breckman was kept on bail for 8 weeks. Then the charge of assaulting Karen Thomas was dropped. Dyfed-Powys Police declined our request for an interview, but in a statement they said, our previous reviews of police involvement have revealed that the actions of individual officers have been reasonable. Our conclusions are supported by a review by ourselves and other agencies, such as the Crown Prosecution Service and the Independent Police Complaints Commission. The couple's AM says there's something wrong here and he wants senior officers to review the case.
I have asked the acting chief constable to look at this again, the allegations which were made, the incidents that took place, and I don't really want to prejudge anything that she would decide about that. I think there is sufficient evidence there to look again.
Since moving to Carmarthenshire from Sussex, the couple's fight with the council has taken over their lives. These 2 pensioners never gave up their campaign.
As bleak as this period was, 2008 brought some good news for the couple. They won significant out-of-court concessions when they brought a civil action against the Thomases.
They had to remove the gates, widen the drive again, and sign an undertaking not to harass or intimidate us in that area. It was wonderful to see the gates gone so we could drive in and out in peace.
But their sense of relief was only short-lived. They made a new and worrying discovery. Carmarthenshire Council had, without telling them, put the couple on an internal blacklist.
You can't just say you're a persistent complainer. There has to be red tape that goes with that. There has to be a form or something. So I asked 4 times, I think, in all, and eventually I was sent their persistent complainants policy.
The way the couple were put on the council's persistent complainers list draws strong criticism from the Ombudsman.
Their procedure sets out how to address it, and particularly how you notify an individual that you believe that their complaint is persistent and not justified, and the steps you take in order to determine whether you're not going to engage with that person in the future. Well, they just didn't do what they were supposed to do. They didn't follow their own policy, and consequently the outcome they reached was wrong.
The Ombudsman also criticised the fact that the council had meetings to review the couple's status as persistent complainers, but didn't tell them the outcome. The council also blocked them from emailing any Carmarthenshire councillors. Then a development changed everything, and it came from an unexpected direction.
Andrew Thomas set up another business here at Blind Pant Farm. When he started a scrapyard, local people complained. This time, the council took action. They served an enforcement notice to stop it. Andrew Thomas appealed, but that proved to be a big mistake.
His appeal triggered a public inquiry which was presided over by a government inspector. At issue was what Mr. Thomas liked to call his storage area. His neighbours said it was a scrapyard. Carmarthenshire's planners asked the inspector to confine his inquiry to just this part of the farm. The inspector disagreed.
I wasn't sure whether it was active discouragement or just a mistake on their part. Certainly on the appellant's side, it wasn't in their interest for me to look at the whole farm. It was in their interest for me to just assess the storage area in isolation. I questioned the council's evidence where they said that there was no planning history to the site, simply because I thought there was planning history to the whole agricultural unit.
The inspector insisted on looking at the whole site.
We're talking about 60 hectares. I mean, most of that was in agricultural use. Certainly the grazing of animals and cropping of hay, that is agricultural. But it was the farmyard itself that I found was not in agricultural use. Inside one of the modern sheds was lorry after lorry after lorry, about 10 lorries. There was another yard facing onto Mrs. Breckman's property, which had another array of vehicles, nothing to do with farming. So I got the impression that neither the yard or quarry area or the shed were in what you might call agricultural use. If anything, the haulage business had taken over. And therefore I can confirm everything that Mrs. Breckman and her partner have been saying.
The council says they made numerous visits to the site and could only act within planning law on available evidence. When the head of planning visited in 2010 after viewing Mrs. Breckman's video, he says he saw one lorry, but there wasn't anything that convinced him there was a material change of use to a depot.
Would you be surprised to know that before you inspected Blind Pant Farm, the Chief Planning Officer at Carmarthenshire Council, Ivian Bowen, went there and saw it for himself and came to a very different conclusion?
Well, it's just surprising, but I don't know what he saw. I can't answer that question without knowing what was there at the time. He must have seen lorry business going on. He must have seen a certain amount of scrap vehicle and lorry business, and there was all sorts going on there.
Mr. Cochrane turned down Andrew Thomas's appeal. It was the most important moment for the couple because they then took the findings of his inquiry to the Ombudsman and he agreed to investigate the whole case. His report said the council was guilty of maladministration and the couple had suffered an injustice.
There were a succession of opportunities to address the issues and each of them was missed in turn. The council started taking views which weren't supported by the facts and took a view about the character of the complainants, which it wasn't justified in doing. Then I think it managed to allow something to drift for many years, which should have been brought to a head and dealt with.
The Ombudsman ordered that the council should make a fulsome apology to the couple, that it should address the enforcement issues arising from the haulage business at Blindpant Farm, and that it should reconsider the way it deals with planning enforcement cases. The couple felt they'd been vindicated.
Absolute relief, because yet again, my complaints and my allegations were all found to be absolutely honest and truthful.
The last few years have been quiet on the lane, but this isn't the end of the story. There are still unanswered questions, such as why did the council allow the Thomases to run their business for 10 years without planning permission? And why did the authorities stick to the claim that they were only operating 3 lorries here when the evidence showed there were far more? And why did they appear to smear the couple's name? We wanted to put these and other questions to Carmarthenshire Council, but they declined to be interviewed. But the statement they did give us shows they still think this was a dispute between neighbours. The authority has agreed to implement the Ombudsman's recommendations. Disputes between neighbours on planning matters are always problematic, and it is impossible to satisfy both parties. Our planning officers acted with integrity. They have not shown any favour or bias to either of the parties. Not good enough, according to the local AM, who says after this case and others, there needs to be a thorough inquiry into the council's planning procedures.
I think a public inquiry would probably be the best way of doing it. Let them also explain in public how they came to some of these conclusions. But I think a lot of people in Carmarthenshire feel that they need that opportunity to have that open discussion in public. And I think there is now sufficient evidence to do so.
Neighbour disputes happen all the time. I mean, nearly every enforcement case is a neighbour dispute of some sort. But not like this, you know, where there has been a justified complaint ignored for years and years. It's the first time I've come across this, ever. And I was an inspector for 24 years.
It's destroyed our dreams and destroyed our future, and we've lost now 11 years of our retirement to just misery.
The council have provided the couple with some compensation. They've issued an apology, but Mrs. Breckman says it's not good enough.
I'll only have peace of mind when the people involved, that's the council and the police, have apologised to me properly. And I mean properly and publicly. When somebody says to me, Mrs. Breckman, we got it so wrong and we are so sorry. That's what I want to hear.
Just days ago, the Ombudsman told the council he was not satisfied with the apology they'd given. The couple's fight and their search for peace of mind goes on.